Hello, I'm Enzo, and today I'll be playing more Gregtech New Horizons. It's been a while. I was originally going to make it's been a year joke, but everyone does that now. New Year's jokes have kind of lost all their value. Anyways, I have made a ton of changes in between episodes. The first major one is installing a mod called Customizable Player Models. This is to fix my skin problem, because I just couldn't get another skin to work with Prism Launcher. It's been really weird. This is the only way to actually make something like this. On top of that, I changed my skin from Kashino, which is one I found on Planet Minecraft, and decided to try my hand in making my own. The skin isn't completely finished, it's still very much a work in progress, especially with her hair, but thanks to customizable player models, I can actually make these wings on her back, just like the character Choco herself. I have to say I'm extremely happy with this model so far. I'm definitely going to work on it a bit more in the future. On top of that, I added a couple of texture packs that you'll notice. The main one is Invisible Healing Axe. I mean, it should be pretty obvious. I don't want to see that annoying healing axe the entire run, and now it's just invisible in my offhand. The other one I'm using is like a dark mode for my inventory UI, which is very helpful. It looks really good. Just like last episode, I decided to start giving myself a bunch of goals to complete in these episodes. My first goal is to make a prospector's kit. Now, I'm pretty stupid and decided to use aluminum to make mine for some reason, instead of, something smart like Damascus steel, which I have plenty of. So that sucks because it doesn't have as much durability as it should, but it's super cheap at least. Except for the other parts I need for it. I need sulfuric acid and hydroxide. Those sound very complicated, but thankfully they're not really. The funny thing is that hydroxide is stupidly easy to make. It is literally hydrogen and oxygen. It's like H2O, but with one less H. So that's very convenient. I was a little scared about making that. The sulfuric acid is actually super easy as well. It requires hydrogen sulfide, which conveniently I make as a part of my oil refining process, so I have plenty of that in the tank, and some water. I have to combine those two in a chemical reactor to make diluted sulfuric acid. And to get the final product, I have to throw the diluted into, a distillery to get sulfuric acid. Well, I'm glad this wasn't as bad as it looked at first. So, what does this prospecting kit do? Well, this one can do two things. If I right-click on Bedrock, I can finally uncover these underground fluid veins, which is super exciting. You see that? Now there's this massive field where I can start collecting underground fluids. We'll get to actually collecting them later, but for now I'm just searching for them. Unfortunately, I found natural gas first. That's not what I was looking for. It has its uses, sure, but I don't want it. You can also use the prospector and click on some stone to actually prospect the ore in that chunk or something like that. I tried it a couple times, but it failed both times, so I don't remember how that works exactly. Conveniently, it wasn't very long before I found this very large sample. And that is pure oil. You can get all sorts of gases and liquids, just natural gas, but you have heavy oil, light oil, raw oil. I don't want any of those. I'm looking for pure oil so that I don't have to change up my distillery setup. And that's perfect because this vein is extremely rich, which means I'll be able to get absolutely tons of oil out of it, which is perfect. On the other hand, though, apparently you can prospect and find literally nothing. I got scammed right there. It's just a straight up empty field. Well, now I know. Still, this is very handy because this lets me get more oil without having to just run across the world to find those geysers. Now that I have a super rich oil vein that I can start extracting from, how do I extract it? Well, I need to make this building called a fluid drilling rig, and this thing is extremely expensive, which is kind of painful. The cobalt gears are definitely going to be the worst part. Everything else isn't the worst, it's just a lot of steel and mechanical parts. I've made plenty of those already, but yeah, I just need to go get everything now. One of the coolest things I've been hoping to make in MV is the elevator. I've spent so much time running up and down floors. Yeah, the elevator is just a lifesaver at this point. Unfortunately, it does cost ender pearls. Well, I have to turn those into a block and then cut it down into ender pearl plates. You get the point. I only have 20 ender pearls, and if you don't already know, I'm mostly playing on peaceful because the mobs are super annoying to deal with. I just prefer the peaceful playstyle more, but I will have to figure out a mob solution eventually, especially if I want stuff like more elevators. And honestly, the ender pearl plates are the most expensive part of the entire process. It's not too bad otherwise, it just requires some steel and aluminum. If it was just those, I wouldn't be complaining at all. I guess the ender pearls make sense, you know, you're teleporting between the levels, but still, very sharp price to pay. On the other hand, elevators are absolutely broken and have saved me like hours of time at this point. So it has its benefits and downsides. In the end, of course, I can't really complain with how purely useful these things are. Next up, I'm going to work partially on one of my goals for this run. I don't have everything I need to do it completely right now. I just wanted to make a basic setup to test this stuff. So I've gotten a bunch of comments telling me about this, and then when I started researching it, I understood immediately why benzene is worshipped. So, benzene is a gas I can make. It's pretty much the best fuel and power source I can get in MV. So, how do you get benzene, you may ask? The easiest way to get it is actually by throwing charcoal into a fluid extractor. That gives you wood tar. Throwing wood tar into a distillery gives you the benzene. It's so stupidly easy for such a powerful product. I love it. And you know, that's the main reason everyone uses it right here, because it's so incredibly powerful. I forgot the exact fuel value. I think it's like 320,000, which is insane by the way, especially for how easy it is to get. Yeah, literally charcoal. Now, there are several ways you can go about doing this. I already have an automatic charcoal setup. That's actually what feeds my boilers. I just have to, you know, break the blocks back into pieces to actually throw into this setup. That's how I'll be doing it for now. You can also make a very cool structure called the Pyrolos oven. That's one thing I've been working on for quite a bit now. I just don't have the rest of the stuff I need. Well, more importantly, I don't know where I want to put it. That's the primary issue I'm facing right now. Either way, it's perfect to have benzene set up now, because that just replaces most of my other fuels currently. It's kind of stupid. But of course, I still have everything powered with steam, because that's just how I'm working. Now that I have a way better power source for my improved electric blast furnace, I still need some other stuff. Part of the reason to upgrade the power is so that I don't have to rely on steam for my electric blast furnace, because, you know, I upgraded it in the last episode, so it takes literally 4 times the power now. It's super expensive, but it's sometimes twice as fast, which is very nice. And I can do a lot more recipes like cobalt, which is kind of important considering I need cobalt gears right now. To speed things up a little bit further, and to save myself some power, I decided to throw a ton of canisters in the compressor. This kind of makes sense when you actually think about it, but it also doesn't. It's an odd recipe. Either way, it makes, well, compressed air. These canisters can then be put into an electrolyzer to make oxygen and nitrogen. Nitrogen has all sorts of uses, but it can be super annoying to make, like now. But it's handy in this case because it lets me speed up the production of cobalt by a little bit to save me some power. Thankfully, with the overpowered MV extruder, I can just throw the finished cobalt into it with a gear extruder shape. You'll see soon enough, I finally learned the difference between them, and it's easy enough to make gears that way. Conveniently, all of the other parts are very expensive, of course, but relatively simple because I have so much stuff made at this point. It's kind of getting crazy how much stuff I have. I mean, I probably have more stuff in terms of like variety of different items. I'm guessing more than like a lot of other mod packs I've played, and I've just barely, well, okay, I'm over 200, somewhere near 300 hours in at this point. I actually gotta check again. Still, this pack is absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, I just about have everything I actually need to make the fluid drilling rig. There's just one tiny issue that I started to face. I'm actually running out of MV circuits. I made a ton in the last episode, and they require LV circuits, which I had to make even more of those. But considering I literally have 3 left and I need 4, of course I need 4. Yeah, unfortunately I'm gonna have to spend some time to make some more LV circuits to craft those into MV. And of course all the other parts, circuit boards, diodes, wires, everything else I'm going to need. I'll be back in a while. While my circuits are processing, I decided to revive the whole smeltery project because it still has a ton of uses. First of all, aluminum. So I was machining a bunch of aluminum to turn it into rods, but like any other rod, it creates a dust as a byproduct. Unfortunately, you can't just throw aluminum dust back into the blast furnace. Well, you can, but that's at later tiers, and it's super expensive. Well, wait, I actually think I can. I just realized, Kanthal tier? I always forget that my coils are actually Kanthal now. Huh, maybe I can just straight up do dust. Well, okay, I didn't realize that earlier. Either way, the smart thing to do would just be throwing the aluminum dust into a compressor, but that's a bit expensive. And I'll admit I kind of forgot about that at this point as well. Or you can throw it into the smelter and cast it as ingots, which gives you raw aluminum that can go straight into the blast furnace. Yes, I know, stupid reason for doing all this, but trust me, it will come in handy very soon. To make the MV circuits even cheaper, I had to make some hydrochloric acid. To get this, I just have to combine chlorine and hydrogen. It's actually pretty cheap. And in the end, you technically recycle the hydrogen, which is nice normally, but kinda sucks for me. I really don't want that hydrogen. I actually have too much at this point, but it's probably useful like everywhere else. After creating the hydrogen chloride, I combine that with some iron dust, which is stupidly easy, to get iron 3 chloride. This is a very specialized, well, acid, I'm guessing, but technically a fluid, that I'm going to need to make some stuff later on. But for now, its purpose is actually to make better circuit boards for MV. Instead of having to use gold wires to make these things, which is far more expensive obviously, I can actually just use gold foil and the base circuit boards, which is infinitely cheaper. Unfortunately, it also chews through gold foil, so I'll need to make a ton of that stuff. Still, far cheaper recipe, which is what I like to see. On the bright side, at least I have way more circuits than I did before. Well, they still have to be crafted, but you get the point. I have the resources and preparations for all of them, which is very nice. One of my eventual goals is to completely automate circuits. That's going to be a massive thing, and it'll probably happen next episode is my guess, because it's going to be pretty important. I also want to automate all of the other mechanical parts and, you know, small things like that that I'll always need. I'm just not sure how I'm going to do it, because I'm thinking of a system where I have just like 1 stack per drawer, but I'm not sure how to limit drawer size. I'll need to figure that out. Anyways, I can finally craft the fluid drilling rig. Awesome. Of course, it's just going to consume all those parts, nothing too special. However, like any other multi-block structure, it's not complete yet. I still need all the other parts to actually build the thing, and then I need to find a spot to put it. The other major thing right now on my list is upgrading my tools. Since I got steel, which is like how many hundreds of hours ago at this point, I've been using steel tools the entire time. Now that I have all these MV machines and resources like Damascus steel, I decided to change my tools and upgrade them finally. I have waited so long to do this. Honestly, I forgot for a little bit because I was working on other projects, but this is going to be huge. Unfortunately, all of the extruder recipes take extremely long, 17 minutes for a hammerhead. But it will absolutely be worth it because the durability difference from my steel tools to Damascus steel is over 10,000. It's insane how much stronger these things get. It's pretty awesome. While everything else is working, I decided to make myself a tunnel all the way to the best patch of oil I could find. Naturally, I decided to do all of this underground because it's just infinitely safer than the surface. I'm assuming you've seen my previous episodes and why I don't like the surface anymore. Unfortunately, I still don't have all the parts I need to complete the drilling rig, but I'm getting very close. Thinking about it now, the fluid drilling rig might be the easiest multi-block structure I've built so far, and probably one of the easiest ones in the entire pack. All you really need is the fluid driller rig, its structure, a power hatch, and an output. An output hatch, not an input bus. The reason I have the input bus is because it tells you to make one, when in reality you legitimately don't need it. You basically just have to throw the mining pipes in the controller itself, so slight waste of an item there. Oh well, at least I know now. And of course, I thought I had everything ready, but I may have forgotten the benzene and the pipes. So, now that I'm back with all of those, it should be time to start this thing up. By adding in the mining pipes, it's gonna do its classic, gotta dig all the way down to the bottom of the world for it to work. Makes enough sense. That's one of the other major benefits of making it down this low, so that it doesn't have to go as far to actually hit bedrock. Because unlike the other oil, like I was saying earlier, this fluid is actually underground below bedrock. So you have to make special buildings like this to mine through that. Okay, obviously it's not mining through the bedrock, that would be broken and kind of useless. It just hits bedrock and then starts extracting my fluid. In this case, oil. Soon enough, I get some beautiful text that says I'm pumping oil, 20 liters a tick. That's about 160 per second, which is awesome. And yeah, I have infinite oil now. It's not technically infinite, it does slowly decrease over time, but still, I'm gonna get millions of liters of oil from this thing. For how cheap it is, it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. After a while, I finally got all the parts I need to upgrade at least my hammer for now. Remember, it's not just the hammer head. I have to make a tough tool rod, which that's 3. All the other parts cost 8. 2 tough plates, 1 hammer head, that's 24, 27 freaking Damascus steel for this thing. Anyways, the durability of my steel hammer is 3,500. I mean, that's quite a bit, but it breaks pretty fast when I'm using it for a while in the nether. With just 1 item, I get 10,000 more durability. Okay, that's quite insane. But then it goes up, 35,000 durability. This is just getting stupid at this point. And I know it looks a bit odd because it's lowering the mining level, but it took me a very long time to realize that you actually have to mine for a bit to get the XP to, level up the mining. I was also looking at and actually using for a little bit vanadium steel. This is a relatively simple and kind of cheap alloy. It does use steel though. And it has way higher mining speed than Damascus steel, but way less durability. The main problem is that I only made the hammerhead out of it, so I didn't really get any boost and lost a ton of durability. But speaking of, that is 67,000 durability. In practice, it's even more because I have the regeneration and the reinforcement modifier. So let's just say I'll almost never need to repair this thing unless I'm doing some serious mining, like hollowing out the entire world or something like that. So that is now my hammer set for a very long time, which is nice. And for some reason, every single time I load up the pack, my texture packs aren't enabled, so I have to re-enable those each time. But then I remember this one thing, shaders. So, fun fact, in all of my countless years of Minecraft, I've never used shaders, once. But it was relatively easy to install because of all the mods in here already. And yeah, it completely changes how the game looks. These shaders are absolutely beautiful, and they're not the craziest ones ever, which is insanity. It just took me a while to go around all of my base and just see how different it was from before. It looks so much better. Originally, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep these shaders or not, but I got used to them very quickly, and I can't really live without them now. You'll see later on, there are some insanely cool effects when I get to it. Thankfully, the shaders always stay enabled, unless I change them. But yeah, every time I load up the pack, I have to turn on my texture packs, which can be a little annoying. And take a look at this. Before, when I would mine in a crazy line like this, shredding through the netherrack, my pickaxe duration would die super fast, but it is barely being touched. This is just ridiculous. It would normally take about a stack of steel to repair my hammer when I fill up, my entire inventory with ores and stuff like that. But from this trip, I think I only used like 25% of the durability. It's just stupid. Sure, on one hand, it is Damascus steel. It's a tiny bit expensive, but I have more than enough of all the resources to keep making plenty of it. So it's absolutely worth the upgrade. Now, if I were an actually smart player, I would just build one of the auto miners and use that to clear out this entire place, but I like mining manually. It's a very calming and relaxing experience, and it allows me to rest my mind, because this run just turns my brain to jam when I try to do anything else. Every so often, you'll see me pop in and out of my test world. This is just to try and figure out all sorts of things. In this case, I read that you can use this heat vent attachment to actually cool down hot coolant, which could be very handy. The only problem is I didn't exactly know how. Apparently you can use pipes on it. That's still very confusing. The best way I found is just to use one of the Gregtech tanks. That seems to work best. I don't know how well this will scale with a ton of, hot coolant in a tank. Not sure how that works, but this is always an option until I get the vacuum freezer, which unfortunately is not till HV, which really sucks because I could do so many cool things with it, but it's going to be a huge leap in technology when I get that. Back in, I believe it was part 3, maybe part 4, but likely 3, I actually made a second advanced coke oven. I completely forgot that I had all of that just in a chest lying around somewhere, and it's not being used. And since I'm always going to want more steel and have absolutely zero use for the tons of coal I have lying around, I decided to actually use this coke oven to create even more coke coal. Coke coal is also useful as a fuel for burning things in general, so this will be super handy to have. And the advanced coke oven doesn't create creosote oil, so I don't have to deal with that anymore. I've been trying to phase that out, and I actually have nothing that uses it currently, which sucks because I still have 700,000 liters in the tank. When I was working on making a ton of new extruder shapes to actually use how powerful the extruder is, I finally realized this entire time I have just been stupid. There is a slight difference between extruder shapes, or molds, and mold forms. Or you get the point. Extruder shapes, molds, yeah, there's a tiny difference. There are only a couple of parts that have them, but it is very important to know which is which, so that you don't end up trying to use the wrong one and your whole thing just not working. So yeah, I finally learned about that. That's the other major reason that the smeltery came in super handy, for now at least. I'm not sure how many other uses this thing really has. It's kind of nearing the end of its life, but still very helpful, especially for this process, because it's the only thing that can really, turn these into shapes. Another super neat thing I can make is dark steel. Yes, it's dark steel from Ender.io, and it's pretty much the same recipe. It requires obsidian dust, steel dust, and coal dust. I mean, pretty simple, right? It's also nice that I can just straight up turn it into ingots with the blast furnace. I don't have to do anything stupid with coolant. I always like that. Even though I didn't really use it for many things, it's super helpful because I can actually upgrade a bunch of tanks and stuff like that, which is what I'm kind of working on. The coolest part is that I can use it to upgrade my diamond chests to the last tier of, chest. Same thing with the standard diamond tanks and everything else like that, but I've been working on making the HV Gregtech tank, which is crazy that I can make it right now. All I really need is the dark steel plates. Everything else is cheap enough. An aluminum plate, easy. Steel pipe, easy. I also need some ULV circuits, which are vacuum tubes, and I produce a ton of those already. One of the other main projects that I've been working on in this episode is automating polyethylene. If you don't remember how to make that, it's basically oil that gets refined into refinery gas. Then I went for the severely steam cracked refinery gas recipe. Viewer recommended that to me. It works really well. Then I throw that into a distillery to get ethylene. Finally, combining ethylene with oxygen gets me my polyethylene. And I later put down a fluid solidifier to turn that into plates and eventually ingots. So yeah, I've automated that now. It's incredibly useful. I also set up a boiler over here. It's a liquid fueled one. I decided to use this to get rid of the rest of my creosote oil and to, power up this entire section. Long story short, I made the boiler one layer too small. I knew I should have made it one taller at the start, and it really sucks because it takes like 20 real life minutes or something like that. It takes a long time for that thing to get to full heat and producing a lot of steam. When I finally run out of creosote oil to fuel this thing, I will switch to fuel because, well, it's right there. And I pretty much have infinite oil now. This setup is really good, despite it being a mess. I mean, all of my setups are. The only tiny problem with it is that the fluid canning system is kind of broken, at least for the refinery gas. So I have to come back here and unclog it every so often, which is super annoying. And one of the major bottlenecks is actually the oil to refinery gas. I really need like 2 or 3 more distilleries to make it work at a decent pace. But yeah, there's not much I can do about that anymore. It's just gonna be working in the background. And you guys wanna know like one of the coolest parts about automating polyethylene like this? It can be used to create pipes, liquid pipes specifically. They have a really good flow rate, even the tiny ones, which is super nice. The only downside is that since they're plastic, they can't handle super hot liquids or gases. Still, these will be insanely useful later on for transporting stuff like water, oxygen, hydrogen, benzene, all sorts of other low heat fluids. So setting this up was one of the most important things I've done in a while. While I have all that other stuff running, I decided to finally get back to some crop breeding. I was working on that a while ago, but yeah, you can see the very sad state of my garden currently. It's filled with weeds, there's dirt and grass everywhere, it's bad. But thankfully, I can actually upgrade my tool now so it can do like everything. Tilling, weeding, all of that good stuff. It also has way better chances for seeds, which is very nice. The primary goal of this project is obviously getting stickweed. Stickweed is how I get, sticky resin to make rubber and of course extract glue from, which will be insanely important later on. Unfortunately, getting this mutation is incredibly rare. I was hoping to get it fast, but no, it took me a very long time to get this. So I'm just working on that in the background while I'm running around doing everything else. There's also this one building I've been wanting to make for a very long time now. I just keep forgetting about and didn't have the resources at the start. Anyways, this is a fish trap. This will automatically get fish for me, which is pretty awesome. It just requires a bunch of wrought iron and steel products, so it's not super difficult. And it's ridiculously cheap at this point, especially for how powerful this thing is. It literally just generates fish every so often. It's pretty stupid if you ask me, but very helpful. As you can see here, it works extremely well. I have a lot of completely useless fish and some other ocean products. Unfortunately, I don't see what I'm looking for here. I decided to add some item pipes and put them to a chest so that I can hold even more stuff. I am fishing for a very specific reason. You'll see why soon enough. You see, the reason I originally started this whole project is to get puffer fish. Unfortunately, I soon realized that I'm actually just stupid and I could have used a few other things like mushrooms that are way easier to get. Anyways, I'm trying to make Weed X. This stuff is a weed killer. It's incredibly helpful for crop breeding so that weeds can't grow instead. To make Weed X, I also need a canister and redstone. Unfortunately, it does consume my precious cell in the process, so that kind of sucks. But it's absolutely worth it for how useful Weed X is. Yeah, I just gotta brew pufferfish, or the grin powder, which is made with mushrooms, spider eyes, and poisonous potatoes, all of which are way easier than pufferfish, but at least the fish are automatic now. A little bit later, I figured out it's infinitely more efficient to breed crops in a checker pattern like this. You are way more likely to get a mutation and way faster. That's when I found this abomination of this earth. As you can see by my reaction, yeah, that thing just screamed at me. I'm like, what is that? Apparently that's a goldfish plant. It's funny because one of the missions actually gives you these, so I guess it's a prank if you don't know what it is. Yeah, it has no use otherwise. It literally just screams. Like, seriously, what kind of monster added this to the game? That is terrifying. But at least we all know what that is now. Just in case you ever see one of those, destroy it immediately. I don't know how many hours it took, but look at this, guys. This is a sticky reed. And yeah, you can tell by my farms that it has taken me a long time to get this thing. I have gone through so many hundreds of seeds at this point just to barely get one sticky reed. Hopefully, now that I have it, it'll make getting more a bit easier by breeding it with more reeds and stuff like that. Who knows? I actually haven't even planted this, even at the time of recording, but still, the fact that I got it is insane, because this is going to be super helpful when I eventually make a sticky reed farm. And the growth is 6 too, which is super nice. These are still low tier seeds, but I am trying to breed them to make them more powerful. That's the entire goal of this whole project. I have to say, I am definitely keeping the shaders. This just looks way too beautiful to get rid of. Even though it does make my room super hot because my graphics card is running constantly when I'm playing Minecraft now, I think it's worth how good the game looks. Anyways, you're probably wondering what I'm doing all the way up here. Well, I wanted to take a look around the area near my base. I have a major problem, and that is space. As much as I love the little base I've made, the entire place has just become a mess. All of the pipes and everything like that is just pure spaghetti. It's pretty horrible to add any new system to this place. So I wanted to start not completely fresh, but wanted to make a new area instead. I believe over here, near the top left of my base, is a very good spot for it. I'm still not sure exactly where, but somewhere around here. The next thing I wanted to work on is upgrading my backpack. I kind of forgot to mention that I actually started making stainless steel recently, now that I can do it in MV. I don't exactly remember what it costs. It's actually super cheap. It's just like iron, chrome, some other sort of fancy metal like that. Whatever, it's stupidly cheap for how powerful it is, and it's the primary resource for HV, so it's good to start stockpiling it right now. I forgot how many stacks I made, but I want to say like 15 plus by the end of this episode. So I am good to go on stainless steel. The only downside is that it takes quite a while to smelt in the blast furnace, but thankfully it doesn't require coolant. The MV extruder has to be just one of the best things I have in my possession. I can make any part a million times easier than I could before. And with my massive inventory of molds, I can make whatever I want, whenever I want. The next tier backpack pretty much just requires stainless steel rings and some tanned leather, which always takes a while to make. I remember reading a tooltip on the loading screen that basically says don't upgrade your backpack with stuff in it, but I put some cobblestone in there to test, and it looks like they fixed whatever that bug was. Still, it's better to be safe than sorry. I don't want to lose all of my super expensive tools and stuff like that just by a tiny bug. Worst case scenario though, I can always reload old saves. Even though I did test out Vandam steel for my hammer a tiny bit, I didn't like it nearly that much, so I decided to go with stainless steel instead. Stainless steel is technically a downgrade to Vandam steel, which is kind of bizarre, but at the same time it's way cheaper because of, well, the pure amount of it I have in storage right now. And I was starting to mine out a tiny bit of an area for my base, but I still wasn't completely sure what I wanted to do. It really sucks because now this giant strip looks ugly and it's just in my mountain. Oh well. I spent a super long time trying to figure out what I wanted my base to look like, and I finally arrived on something like this. Alright, this isn't how it's going to look. I'm just testing a bunch of things and figuring out the right shape I want for my base. you can probably see one of these is nowhere near as ugly as the others. Of course, I'm pretty decent at making circles and block games like this because I play a ton of From the Depths, so I'm used to building turrets and stuff like that. And of course, they're mantlets, so this is relatively easy for me. And this is the biggest step in building my new base. Funnily enough, it's just trying to figure out the shape of what I want to build. I had a super cool idea for this, just you wait. In case you're wondering, if this episode is a bit shorter than the others, well, this is where all the playtime went to, by the way, just clearing out this entire area. I tried to do the math, and it's definitely not entirely accurate, but if I mined out this entire 51 block wide circle, all the way down to bedrock, it would be over 800,000 blocks I would mine through, which is pure insanity if you ask me. So it's definitely going to take a while, and I'll do more of it over the next episode. The primary issue I faced while mining all the way down is trying to get back up out of the pits. Yeah, I don't actually have anything that does that well. I could make a giant ladder, but that's extremely slow and stupid. However, I found some really cool looking stuff in one of the mission tabs. That's actually jetpacks. Yeah, you heard that right. Jetpacks. I can make two different types of jetpacks currently. There's the copter pack, which gives you like more hover, also consumes diesel or other types of liquid fuels like that, or the more simple coal jetpack, which is exactly what it sounds like. You feed it coal and water, and it produces steam for you to fly with. It's pretty awesome. Of course, both of these jetpacks do have a relatively low height limit. I mean, it's still like 190 blocks, but still, you can't go up to, 200 plus. All I can say is that this is one of the best items I've made so far. It is easily the greatest investment I've made as well, because of how much time it saves me. It requires all sorts of random parts, steel, bronze, aluminum, bricks, all that stuff, but it's not too difficult. When I open it up, I get a little inventory, and I can actually put it on my back in its own special tab, which I absolutely love, so that I don't have to waste, my chest plate spot instead. That's very nice. And from there, I just need some water and coal. Easy enough, I have plenty of that already. However, it's not working even though I have everything in it already. That's because you actually have to activate it with a specific keybind, and once I figured that out, it starts burning coal to produce heat. Of course, this is water, so it has to reach 100 degrees Celsius to actually turn into steam and give me flight power. So that's gonna take a minute. A little bit later, we're finally ready, and look at this. I have a freaking jetpack already. That is the most awesome thing ever. And I have to say, every single mod pack ever should have an early jetpack system like this. Instead of having to wait until you have advanced electronics to make a jetpack, having something simple like a coal-powered jetpack that makes steam? Yeah, I think everyone needs that, just for quality of life. This is the best thing ever. Of course, it's not perfect. It doesn't activate instantly like other jetpacks. It can only slow my fall so much, so I have to be careful with how I use it and how I fall, but that's what the hang glider is for. Hang glider and jetpack is an insane combination, one of my favorites for traveling. Needless to say though, I love this jetpack so much. And as far as I can tell, there aren't really any downsides. You just keep supplying it with coal and water and you're fine. And you don't have to use coal. Way later on, I actually swapped to blocks of coke coal, and that takes forever to run out, which is very nice. Yeah, this is a must get as soon as possible. It's way too good. And unlike all the other boilers, it doesn't actually waste steam. Even though I thought it would because of how it sounds, it produces steam up until the limit and then just stops, which is very nice. So it doesn't waste water or coal. And it took me a while to figure out, but you can actually disable the sound it creates in the mod settings, which is very nice, because the slow hissing gets very annoying very fast. And at first, I thought it was actually going to explode because of the sound, but no, it appears safe after several dozen hours using it. I mean, this pit by itself looks absolutely beautiful, but the shaders are the icing on the cake. It just looks beautiful, especially for Minecraft. This pit is only half the depth that it should be. I decided to mine until Y50 instead of bedrock, or what, 0, 1? I can never exactly remember. But yeah, this will be way more than enough for now. Of course, that means I need blocks to actually fill in the different levels of the base. That's going to be a whole deal. It took me a while to figure out what blocks I would want to use for my base, and I eventually settled on this super cool material called hempcrete. So they actually added concrete back from, newer versions of Minecraft all the way to this old 1.7.10, but this is technically the recipe for exactly the same thing. Hempcrete is literally a substitute for concrete. It's pretty funny. Either way, this stuff costs gravel, sand, wheat, and plant balls. Thankfully, these are all easy resources to get, which is very nice. You can craft a ton of this stuff, and you actually get a 50% bonus if you make it in an assembler instead, so that's very nice. The only downside to this stuff is, just like concrete, you actually have to throw it in water to make it, well, solid instead of like sand. Now that I think about it, I should have just built with this stuff. Like, I am really stupid actually. Why did I just throw the stuff in a mixer with water? I could have easily built up the walls of the place and just poured water down it. So I didn't think about that at the time, but you get the point. Most of this process was legitimately just waiting for the mixers to create the solid hempcrete. While all of that is working, I have a tiny problem in my oil refinery. You see, I made a tank for my hydrogen sulfide, but that is filling up. Actually, it's completely full at this point, so I need to deal with that stuff. Thankfully, I did explain this a bit earlier when I needed to make it for the prospecting kit, but if you forgot, it's pretty simple. Hydrogen sulfide gets combined with water, that makes diluted sulfuric acid. That goes into a distillery to make pure sulfuric acid. That's going to go in another tank, and apparently it's supposed to be super important for later on. I know what you're wondering. This isn't Minecraft. Of course it's not. This is called plasticity. It's a neat little 3D editing software that I use. By use, I mean barely, because I'm not great at it, but I did want to try something. I wanted to use my 2 brain cells to try and figure out a neat little 3D model of my base to show you guys what I'm kind of thinking of. Just like any other 3D editing software though, there's like 1,000 ways to do everything, and I'm actually not very good at this, so you've got to bear in mind with me for a little bit. Long story short, my entire idea for this base is kind of like a giant observatory. You know, the ones where they open up at the top and have the telescope pointing out? I think that would look extremely cool. Of course, that's just for the top. The entire base is going to be a massive cylinder with a bunch of levels all throughout it. At the start, a lot of my base is actually going to still be underground. That's where all the machinery and everything else like that is going to go. And then maybe the cooler, more advanced stuff would go up at the top, and higher levels will likely have like storage, living space, and other things like that. Eventually, I want to build it up near the building limit, which I think is 256 in here. And that's where I would like to make, this dome and the telescope pointing out. It'll eventually also be where I launch rockets, which will be super cool. So I hope you guys can kind of see what my plan for this base is. It's gonna take a very long time to accomplish, but I think it'll be very neat when it's done. There's still a couple of other blocks I want for my base. Clear glass is one of them. To make it, I'm just using a chisel to transform regular glass. To get regular glass, there's this super cool recipe I found using the fluid extractor. You can either throw sand into the fluid extractor, or even silicone dioxide, which I have a ton of in storage, but the pure silicone dioxide takes way longer. Either way, you then throw that molten glass into a fluid solidifier, and you can make blocks of glass. Or you can make glass tubes to make the vacuum tubes, which is insanely handy. You probably know what the glass is for, but you're probably wrong at the same time. You'll see, I have a super cool idea for this place. And of course, the floor is going to be concrete. I mean, you should have figured. I love the movement speed of concrete way too much to use anything else. Once I had tons of hempcrete produced, I was actually so eager to start building the place that I made several layers already. Unfortunately, I realized a little bit too late that I accidentally had it white still. You can change the color of hempcrete through the chisel, which is super handy. Otherwise, this observatory would absolutely be white, but I would like it to be gray instead, because I think that looks the best and most fitting for something like this. Black also looks good, but nowhere near as cool as just a pure gray does. One of the other things I'm working on is actually going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Unfortunately, the input hatch I'm trying to make has to be made in an MV assembler, which is very annoying. I guess it makes sense. Anyways, this input hatch is required to make the MV crop manager. The crop manager is going to be super helpful for one of my later builds, but for now I actually need it to harvest wheat because, you know, I'm trying to make more hempcrete. I need absolutely tons of hempcrete to build up the walls to this place. I don't remember how big the wall around this place is, but it takes like a stack and a half. I don't know, let's just go with the rough number of 100 per level. And considering I have to make at least 50 levels, I probably did around 600, that's probably 6,000 hempcrete I need, which is just insane. I'm guessing most of you thought that the glass was going to be for windows. Okay, it probably will be for the higher levels, but definitely not underground. I had this super cool idea when I was designing this thing, and I wanted a glass ring around the edge. Since I won't be running around the edge and don't need the concrete, I think that the glass is going to provide a super cool looking effect, especially with the shaders. Just you guys wait, it's going to be beautiful. At first, my plan was to make a 3 wide glass ring, but I eventually decided to go with 5 wide, and it looks way better. So yeah, it's a tiny bit ugly for now, especially because it's too wide in some parts. I didn't build it quite right, but yeah, once it's all done, it's gonna look so good. Probably one of the coolest things I've ever built, actually. Look at this. This is exactly what I imagined when I was designing this. The god rays of light just shining all the way down to the bottom. Alright, this is absolutely the greatest thing I've ever built in Minecraft. It is just so beautiful looking. It's absolutely perfect. I hope you guys agree too. I put a lot of work into this base design. And I say at least it is paying off. I can't wait until this base is fully developed and I have like all sorts of machinery and stuff everywhere. It's gonna be so cool. I can't wait to play more of this. I also love how 30 seconds after pausing that recording, one of my machines casually power fails. I have to say, I've been extremely lucky up to this point and haven't had many of these power failures. Of course, the machine just needs some regular maintenance. It's nothing special, I just wanted to note how lucky I've been so far. Building that polyethylene factory was one of my best ideas so far. That was another thing I already explained earlier, but yeah, infinite plastic. How can you go wrong? I can make so many plastic pipes extremely cheap now, especially thanks to my beautiful MV extruder. So yeah, I don't have to worry about making tons of wrought iron or potent anymore. I can just make plastic for most things. It's beautiful. I've also been working on making everything for the Pyrolos oven. This takes a ton of bricks, bronze, like a ridiculous amount of bronze, steel, iron plates, all of that stuff. We already know I have plenty by now. I also need some cupro-nickel products, and yeah, that's about it. I mean, all of these basic materials make up just about everything at this point, so you shouldn't really be surprised. Unfortunately, there's one thing I didn't completely think about at this point. I mean, sure, I have just about everything to make the Pyrolos oven. You know the tiny problem? I still need coils to make the thing work. Yeah, coils. Unfortunately, I can't just use cupro-nickel because that would be way too easy. I actually need Kanthal. Oh yeah, I also got a casual creative tool modifier. I haven't used it yet, but that will be very handy at some point. But yeah, if you guys remember last episode, you might know just how painful Kanthal is to actually turn into ingots. It's not that expensive. It's literally just like iron aluminum and nickel or chrome, something like that. It's pretty cheap. Unfortunately, it smelts into hot ingots, which I then have to cool down using coolant. Of course, I don't have a vacuum freezer or anything fancy, so I have to store up the hot coolant for a while. You saw that earlier. So yeah, that's going to take a very long time, which is the other issue with Kanthal. It takes a minute to produce and a minute to cool down in the mixer. So it's going to be like 2 hours to produce all of this. But on the bright side, now that I have tons of aluminum, I can easily make something like this. A giant aluminum tank that holds 11 million liters. That is ridiculous. But that's why I love this game progression so much. It's just like plastic, where now that I have it automated, it's super cheap and I can make tons of very powerful pipes. That's one of the main reasons I'm loving Gregtech New Horizons so much. The progress is extremely satisfying. I'm back in the testing world. I just wanted to see how the Pyrolos oven works and wanted to figure out the layout. But the most interesting thing I learned after 260 hours is that you can press the H button in this menu and it actually tells you what you can place where. Yeah, that would have saved me a lot of frustration when I was making the electric blast furnaces. So yeah, that's very helpful to know, because some blocks can only be placed in like the bottom or the top of your multi-block structure. And in this case, I don't even need the thing at the top of the Pyrolos oven, because I'll never be using any inputs, at least for this one. To actually fuel the Pyrolos oven, I'm going to need a ton of wood. Of course, I'm using jungle bonsai trees because they just give wood and saplings, instead of like oak that also gives apples. Even though the apples can be used for something later on, I don't want to have to deal with a third byproduct. I'll definitely admit now, I seriously regret using all of my really good bonsai trees here because, well, I took them all from the farm, which means I lost all of these. I mean, they're not insanely good seeds, but still, they have better stats than default. And very soon you'll see that I don't need this much wood. I quickly started to produce way more wood than I actually needed. So yeah, there's that. And yeah, I'm just gonna fill up the rest of this with a bunch of seeds. I forgot the exact math, but this platform is 15 by 15. I think it's somewhere over 760 saplings that are gonna be growing here. It's pretty ridiculous. After a while, all 3 layers of the farm are done, and it's time for me to get started on the rest of the Pyrolos setup. It's actually quite simple. I just have to put the output of the Pyrolos oven, well, into a distillery. I also need a fluid extractor for the charcoal, of course. You're probably wondering what's powering this entire thing, and that's actually an entire line of diesel from my main base. Yes, I'm going to be using oil to produce benzene. It's an interesting production chain. But yeah, this benzene line is going to be fueling my new base over here. So I'll eventually have to move the oil setup and redo it, but I have 2 million liters of fuel. That should last a super long time, and who knows what I'll replace it with. I mean, probably more benzene. Like I said earlier, I produce way more wood than I can actually use in this setup, so I'm probably gonna have to make like 2 or 3 more Pyrolos ovens. You know, I think that'd be pretty awesome if I made a few more Pyrolos ovens. I would definitely have to carve out more space though. I don't know why I insist on compacting my build so much when I'm literally playing Minecraft with an infinite world size where I can do whatever I want, and yet I work with these restraints. I don't know, I'm just weird like that. Speaking of that, I made this absolutely horrible spaghetti setup. Besides the wood, the tree farm obviously produces a ton of saplings that I have to deal with. I could always make a trash can to throw these away. I don't know if there are other ones, but I definitely know the one I made for part of this costs ender pearls, which is horrible. I don't have like any of those left anymore. Anyways, I'm using the saplings, compressing them into plant balls, and then throwing those plant balls into an autoclave. That's why this entire setup is so convenient. I'm using diesel as the fuel, and guess what? I can use diesel with plant balls to make carbon mesh, or at least the raw fibers It requires 2 fibers to actually make a mesh, and that's still like the bio mesh. I have to throw that into an electric blast furnace to make the actual carbon mesh. Still, this is an incredibly powerful setup, and it's going to be super useful later on, especially considering the other way to make the meshes requires polyethylene, which isn't bad now that I have it automated, but this way is infinitely cheaper and uses a otherwise worthless byproduct. A bit of context for the next clip you guys will see. I was back in the Nether, and since I had to change like launcher instances, basically the chunk wasn't loaded, so unfortunately my brick blast furnaces weren't actually working. I decided to go AFK for a while to finish up the recipe so I could move them back to my main base. I know there are infinitely better ways of making steel, but these things still have a tiny bit of use in them, so I decided why not, I'll keep them for a bit. And here's the funny thing that happened. Out of nowhere, fireworks started appearing. And yeah, Happy New Year. That's pretty funny, cause I kid you not, I was playing this at midnight on New Year's Eve, technically, then it went to New Year's Day. This message will appear when you play after New Year's, as I learned in a testing world. I was just a bit shocked by it. I'm glad it wasn't some sort of achievement though. The last time I got a fireworks achievement when I was AFK was the oil refinery incident, if you guys remember that. The final thing to note here is it looks like they changed how the bricked blast furnace works again. Instead of having to remove these fire bricks with your wrench, you can finally use your pickaxe again. It was cruel and unusual punishment to remove these things with a slow wrench. But I'm glad you can use your pickaxe now, because look how fast I can clear through this thing. Which means it's also going to be easier to remove it next time I have to move these things. Since I decided to make another compressed block of ender pearls, I had to use my second to last ender pearl on making a trash can. Why a trash can? So that I can deal with all the ashes I produce in the Pyrolos setup. This is only from the fluid extractor, of course, but yeah, there's nothing else they're really useful for. Of course, I know you can actually throw them into a centrifuge and get some resources out of them, but it takes so long, it's just not worth it. Like, I've actually had a centrifuge going in the background, getting stuff out of ashes. I mean, it's pretty nice and all, but I don't think the stuff you get out of it is 100% worth it, really. Unfortunately, I have to trash these. It's the only way. I will note, though, this goes against everything I believe in, especially with a mod pack like this, where you can reuse literally everything and do so many things with your resources. Just like oxygen not included, there's always a way to reuse or recycle some resource, and that is one of my favorite parts about Gregtech New Horizons. Since Pyrolos ovens are very expensive because of the Canthal coils I need to make, I decided to move over my advanced coke oven over here. And this is the one that was supplying my base with charcoal, the one by the tree farm. I didn't exactly think about what would happen when I actually removed this until a little bit later on. Just you guys wait. It's almost like removing your base's power supply is not a good idea. You're probably wondering why I'm in the Twilight Forest. Well, there's one thing I'm hoping to get here. Long story short, the plan didn't exactly work like I was hoping. I made the MV miner so that I could start harvesting more resources from here. I decided to go for one of the talc veins, just because I can also use that, when I happened to get exactly what I was looking for immediately: amethyst. So my plan was to make dark glass, or tinted glass, one of those two, because I have a really cool design idea in mind. Unfortunately, I can't actually get amethyst easily. The only place it spawns currently is in the Twilight Forest, but the only place that it has actual rich veins of is on another high tier planet. So unfortunately, that plan won't exactly work. My entire plan is to make another one of those farms, but instead of trees, it's going to be ore berries, since I want to automate iron, aluminum, copper, bronze, steel, all of the basic resources. The primary issue with all of the ore berries is that they can only grow when it's pretty dark. You see the issue here? I want to light the entire base up. That kind of conflicts. However, if I have some sort of tinted glass, Well, I can make a super neat little farm in the dark, but have lighting on the outside. I wanted to make tinted glass. It's backported from, new versions of vanilla Minecraft. Or I can make dark glass, but that requires curtains, and curtains require a ton of black wool, which is pretty annoying to get. So, considering amethysts aren't really possible to get, I guess for next episode, I'm gonna have to figure out some wool. I mean, it's not that difficult. All I really need to do is just make a cotton farm and then automate cotton into string and wool, but still pretty annoying. I can't just make what I want. And in case you were wondering why I went for soapstone and this specific vein, well, I'm actually going to use that for my new automation wing of my base. All of these soap and talc resources actually have a ton of different stuff in them that I can electrolyze and use, which is going to be very interesting. I'm especially excited because it contains a ton of oxygen and hydrogen, two of the major resources I'm going to be needing for a lot of stuff I want. So yeah, that's why I'm here, that's what I'm attempting to do, and also why I've chunk loaded these things, so that I can go back to the overworld while they work. Back to the testing world, I seriously need to figure something out. Can you automate bricked blast furnaces? Unfortunately, you cannot, it appears. I've tried a few things. The first was obviously Gregtech pipes, but there's absolutely no way to make this thing work. You can't input items automatically, you can't output items automatically. It's quite unfortunate because I was really hoping to use these to make my steel. I realize now they are extremely slow compared to the electric blast furnace, but I wanted to get some more life out of these things if possible. Unfortunately, I won't be able to. The second thing I tried was logistics pipes. Now, I thought I had used these earlier on, like episode 2 or something like that, but no, apparently those were Project Red pipes that I was trying to make before I learned about Gregtech pipes. But logistics pipes is something I seriously want to get into because, well, I saw a tiny bit of it in another video, and I think it could be super helpful for automating my base. And considering the major lack of automation I've had so far, yeah, I really want to change that because, well, this is all about automation. That's pretty important to this mod pack, especially if I want to get anywhere close to the middle or even late game. Even though all of that testing was a complete bust, there's still one more thing I want to figure out in the testing world. Since I'm going to have to switch to electric blast furnaces for everything soon enough, I need to figure out how they actually work. Now, what exactly do I mean by how they work? Well, you see, I haven't actually done wall sharing, which is what you're supposed to do, put two of these together. And I kind of remembered that. I got a bunch of comments telling me to fix, the two blast furnaces I have making aluminum. So that would probably be smart. And it would definitely be smart to learn how wall sharing works. This is another thing I saw in another video where they had a massive array of electric blast furnaces like this, and this is what I came up with. It's an abomination, I have to admit, but it works. And that's what's important here. It's an array of 6 electric blast furnaces that can be easily expanded, and yeah. I changed the inputs and outputs a little bit now that I understand how wall sharing really works. It's actually not that complicated. I mean, it absolutely looks complicated, but I've dealt with worse. So yeah, at some point I'll need to make all the resources to actually build something like this in my actual base and make it work. Obviously these are very basic electric blast furnaces. It's just going to be making steel at a slow rate. And of course, I'm going to use benzene as the fuel. Also, knowing where each block can go in the structure makes this infinitely easier than before. It's a shame I can't really place anything at the top since that is the fluid output hatch and obviously muffler, but that always goes in the middle. This was also super good as a learning experience because now I seriously understand how these multi-block structures work, at least a little bit better than before. If you look closely, you might notice that the day count is way different than the other clips. That's because this part was recorded after I recorded the final part, or what I thought would have been the final part, because there's one last thing I want to do that's going to be a major upgrade to my base. And that is actually lighting. One pretty important thing. I want to try out some different types of lights for my base just to see if they make a big difference or not. The major one is going to be from Ender.io. There's only one tiny problem. Ender.io lights are ridiculously difficult and expensive, at this point at least. The first thing I'm going to need is fused quartz. To make fused quartz, I can throw quartzite dust or all other sorts of silicon dioxides into the electric blast furnace, or alloy smelter. Either one works, but yeah, that's how I'm going to be making it. Relatively cheap. Unfortunately, cheap cannot be said about the other ingredient I need, silicone ingots. You guys know how fun these are to make? I have to throw silicone into the electric blast furnace and cool it off with coolant. That really sucks. I'm wasting even more coolant having to do this. Thankfully, I still have a ton in reserve. It's just annoying having to do it at this tier. I seriously can't wait to get a vacuum freezer, or something else to properly cool down the coolant. I have a feeling that's going to be a trend throughout this run, where I don't have the exact right thing I need to make what I want. I have to do a slightly more annoying process before I can get the machine I need. And it's going to be in the next tier or something like that. Either way, with some other random resources, I was able to make some lights. Unfortunately, they require redstone to activate. To make them inverted, aka they're always on, I need to make redstone torches. But of course, I can't just make redstone torches. The easiest way to make them is through the assembler though, so it's not nearly as bad as I thought. And let's give them a shot, see what they do. Well, I mean, they're lights. They seem to be a bit more powerful than normal torches, and it makes them pretty decent for mounting on the ceiling. They can actually be placed on any side, so ceiling, floors, walls, making them extremely useful. But unfortunately, they're not as bright as I was hoping they would be. I want something extremely bright. I just don't know what that's gonna be. And I seriously don't want to make the floodlights. Those look extremely annoying to make. Well, besides making them, you also have to keep them fueled, which is my major problem. I don't want to have to fuel my lights. Do you guys know how stupid that sounds? I actually have to power my lights. This is Minecraft I'm playing. I shouldn't have to power my lights. Oh well, I'll figure that out eventually. For now, these Ender.io lights are doing the trick. I would normally note down how much playtime I have, but I forgot to do that for last part. So I'm guessing here, but I want to say last part I ended at around 250 hours. And this part added 60 hours to that. That's ridiculous. Meaning I have around 310 hours in this run already. I've just barely gotten into the game. This is the craziest thing I've ever played. Still, I absolutely love Gregtech. I am very much enjoying this playthrough. It's the most unique mod pack I have ever played, and I cannot wait to see what's in store for me. Just like this episode, there is going to be an insane amount of stuff to do for next part. Like I said earlier, I want to automate all sorts of basic resources to make future progression way faster. That's going to be the game of next episode. Automating as much as possible. Iron, steel, bronze, copper, aluminum, all the big ones. Also oxygen and hydrogen because they do all sorts of things. Yeah, I just need everything. And that is in the hope that I can start automating little things, like machine parts, so I can make machines without having to craft every single part every single time. I'm definitely gonna have to expand the benzene farm quite a bit, considering my log storage is completely full, which is quite crazy, so that's gonna be a major focus. Unfortunately, that means I have to make more Kanthal, which is always super annoying, but not the worst, of course. And as we all know, I'm going to have to make massive expansions to this base. I'm just barely using one floor of it. I'm hoping to use other floors, at least in the ground, for manufacturing, resource production of all kinds, stuff like that, you get it. And the upper levels I'm hoping will be more of a living space and storage areas, where I'm gonna keep everything. I'll figure out the pipe logistics network. I think this base is gonna be extremely cool when I'm done with it. However, that's still gonna take a lot of time. I know you Gregtech viewers, you guys are like vultures. I see all of your comments, trust me. Everyone just wants more Gregtech. Trust me, I do too. But I also have to play other games because, well, I have fans that like different types of games. Some are here for Borderlands, some are here for Minecraft, maybe a rare couple that actually like my variety. And of course, I play games in rotation so that I don't burn myself out. I know you can't really see it here, but near the end I was absolutely slowing down. My brain just couldn't figure out what I wanted to do next. But anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I always appreciate it. As always, a special thank you to my channel members, and this is going to be Enzo from LookIntoGaming, signing out.